So it's my pleasure to welcome Marianthi Yerapetratu. She is a professor and also chair of the Department of Chemical and Biochemical Engineering at Rutgers, and this is the State University of New Jersey. And so a couple of things that she's focused on in her research area is process operations. She's also focused on design and synthesis of flexible production systems, and in particular focusing on pharmaceutical manufacturing. That's what we're going to be hearing about today. And then also modeling of reactive flow processes and metabolic engineering with a focus on biopharmaceutical production. She's been supported by a number of federal agencies, including the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundation, Office of Naval Research, and NASA, and including a number of industrial partners as well. A couple of her accomplishments include the Outstanding Faculty Award. She's received the Rutgers Board of Trustees Research Fellowship for Scholarly Excellence and also a very prestigious NSF Career Award. She has more than 180 publications, and she's been invited as a speaker for numerous national and international conferences. A little bit about her background: she got her Bachelor of Science from the National Technical University of Athens, Greece, and her PhD from Imperial College in London in 1995, and then completed a postdoctoral research position at Princeton University, and afterwards joined Rutgers University in 1998. So today she's going to be talking about an integrated platform that will enable efficient flow sheet simulation and analysis, an assessment of design alternatives, the feasibility analysis of the production line, and control and optimization of process design and operations. So with that, I would like to welcome Marianthi, and I'll go ahead and turn over the presenter privileges to her. So welcome, Marianthi.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Let me share my screen. And so, John, can you hear me well?
Sound great, Marianthi, and it looks great too.
Okay, great. So I'll get started then. I'm going, as John mentioned, I'm going to present some of our work in the area of pharmaceutical modeling, and in particular, a number of things that we have done in the last almost 10 years now in my lab under the umbrella of the NSF-funded Engineering Research Center for Structured Organic Particular Systems. This is a center funded by National Science Foundation and involves the collaboration of Rutgers, Purdue, NCIT, and University of Mayures in Puerto Rico. And the underlying theme of the center is actually to advance pharmaceutical manufacturing. So my lab and my work in this area focuses on the modeling aspects of the different process operations and how this affects the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. So before I get started, I would like, of course, to thank John for making this webinar happen, and actually for all his efforts towards the CAST webinars. So as an outline, what I'm going to talk to you about today is the problem of how to take pharmaceutical powders. So we're going to talk about the downstream manufacturing of pharmaceutical products. So how these powders then go through a set of different processing steps to be transformed into the final product, which is a product with specific properties, including weight, drug concentration, hardness, and obviously we are also very much interested on properties that affect how this is dissolved into our stomachs as our final products. So these efforts includes different aspects. The first aspect is or to create models for each individual process operation. And I'm going to talk to you about the need of developing reduced order models so that can be used in a simulation environment, but also can be used for optimization purposes. Then how you connect those different processes into a flow sheet model, and this is a tool that has been used a lot in many different other companies, including chemical, petrochemical, and consumer goods products, but has not been used in pharmaceutical manufacturing. This type of models and flow sheet model can be used to perform a number of interesting studies, including sensitivity analysis and feasibility. And I'm going to talk to you about mostly feasibility analysis today because there is not enough time to cover global sensitivity analysis, although this is very important to find out what are the most important parameters in the models. And the final part of the talk, I'm going to cover some of the ideas and development that we have done in the area of optimization. So the main problem there is that we have a set of specific targets that we need to achieve for the final products. So how we can go to reverse the order and find out what is the optimal operating conditions, and also optimal set of design parameters that can be used to achieve this final set of product qualities in an optimal way. So let me first start by motivating why we need this type of work at this specifically time point. So what I'm showing here in this slide is the different stages for a new drug discovery from the point of the pre-discovery that it shows here at the beginning of the pipeline, where we have 5,000 to 10,000 different molecules, and then how this pipeline is reduced as you move through the preclinical, clinical trials, which we know as phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And then after the FDA has been approved the program to product to large-scale manufacturing. So the main reason why we are basically looking at the manufacturing side at this time point is that up to now there is a lot of the main income of pharmaceutical companies were coming out of the new drug development and patent drugs. However, this has been changing the last few years. Also, the industry is experiencing a very rich pipeline. So there are a number of products that have been in the pipeline. So we are starting looking at the manufacturing as the bottleneck of bringing these new products into the markets. Also, another reason is the main focus, the current focus of pharmaceutical companies or more personalizing medicine, which has a great potential, but also they are very expensive. So there is a need for incorporating a more flexible and more agile manufacturing technologies in order to be able to reduce the expense of these new drugs and bring them faster and more reliable to the market. So the current, before we move to what is the new ideas in pharmaceutical manufacturing, let's take a quick look of how the manufacturing is being done today. So by the time that the drug has been approved by FDA, then there is a series of stages that has to be done, starting with a small-scale experiments and then scale up, clinical trials, of course, and then scale up in order to go to the manufacturing sites. And all of those steps are executed in a batch mode. That means that its batch is being produced, different samples are tested, and then there is a pass or fail of the particular batch, which means, that there is an increased number of batches that are fails, and then, of course, this increases the cost. So if there was a way to be for this to be tested more efficiently, that will decrease the cost of production. So that led to an initiative by SPA, like almost 10 years ago, that they call it quality by design, QBD for short. And I have here a quote from Janet Woodcock, who is the director of the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research at Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, which basically put emphasis into the need of having efficient, agile, and flexible pharmaceutical manufacturing, so as we can produce high-quality drugs without extensive regulatory oversight. That means that we need to have, the three targets that are showing here, that basically we need to have a scientific way of pharmaceutical development, a more qualitative way to understand the design efforts from all the way through the stages of the commercialization, and full understanding of how the product attributes and process are related to the product performance. And this is basically where the main effort of the main efforts are being focused. So how can we as chemical engineers and as process engineers can help in this approach? So the first and the easiest way forward is to think about moving from batch, and the figure that I have here is from a batch mixer, which is, as you see, double the size of a person, and it's very of course, it has a very high capacity, but of course, it leads to a number of different problems, including how you sample, how you avoid batch-to-batch variability, how to do a better control of the process, and so on and so forth. So if we're able to move from the batch to continuous manufacturing of products, that means a number of different advantages. And I have shown here some of the advantages, which are, of course, the scale up. So you can increase production by just increasing the time that you are running the process and not the size of your process. You can move towards a more automated operation. You can eliminate the human error by having automated control, so having a better control scheme. We have a much smaller footprint. And another advantage is that we are enabling much better flexible manufacturing, and I'm going to talk to you about this in the next few slides. And that means all of those components leads to better, smaller costs, so better use of the invested capital, and hopefully to a better quality product, so not that many failed batches. So let's take a look at the product that we're trying to produce, right? So the products are what is shown here as the tablet. And the tablet includes the active pharmaceutical ingredient. I'm going to call this API. And this is the ingredient that has the therapeutic effect. So this is the ingredient that makes, the pain goes away. So the most important property of the final product is, of course, to have a specific concentration in a dosage form, and the dosage form is the tablet that is shown here. The rest of the ingredients are ingredients that are there to have the final product, but have no therapeutic effects. But you need those ingredients in order to be able to have the tablets in the form that we know, so as to have specific hardness to be able to survive handling. So when you open the packet, the tablet does not dissolve in your hands. But also have certain, the hardness is not as high, so it's not able to be dissolved at our stomach. So there is a balance of the specific final product properties. In my talk today, I'm going to consider only products, only drugs that are coming in a tablet form. The reason is that 80% of all the drugs that are being consumed is actually in a tablet form. And as an example, I'm giving you here aspirin, which is something that we hopefully all know. So the active pharmaceutical ingredient in this tablet is, as we all know, the acetyl salicylic acid, but there are other things inside this small tablet of aspirin that we're taking, that, as I said, the main reason why you have all those ingredients is to be able to have the final properties of the tablet. And of course, the main also property is the dissolution rate, so it has to be fast so as to have a quick pain relief. So now that we see what is the product, let's look at basically the challenges faced in order to be able to derive a flow sheet model for pharmaceutical processes. The main challenges, as are shown here, is first the lack of universal set of material properties throughout the processes and industries. That means that there is not a set of specific properties that all the different pharmaceutical manufacturing industries are doing in order to test the quality of the final product. Also, we are talking about powder materials, so there is an inherent variability in terms of those properties. So every time that we're getting a specific excipient, let's say lactose, it has a different property than the time that we got it last time. There is also a lack of technology for monitoring desired material properties online. So when we have a number of tests to be able to monitor the properties, but those cannot be directly used online. Moving towards the modeling challenges, there is a lack of correlation between the operating variables and material properties. So if we have a set of properties, how those are affected by the processes, and the lack of control strategies. So for modeling, what has been in the literature is the majority of the modeling initiatives are towards discrete element method simulations. And those are very computational, very expensive because they deal with each individual particle, and you write all the equations and the forces that make this particle move throughout the different processes, which is, of course, that's the reason why it's so computational expensive. So there is a need for developing reduced order models that are able to capture the experimental data that we have, but also try to capture some first principle understanding of the processes that we have. So there is some recent progress in solid process modeling, and we are using GPROMS as our modeling environment, but also Aspen Plus has been developing tools for solid processing modeling after the acquisition of Solid Sim Engineering a few years ago. So what is actually needed is, when we started doing this work, was to start from the beginning and start developing the unit operation models, and then put all these different models into libraries in order to be able to capture input-output relationship. And then as we do that, then we can proceed as we have done with chemical and petrochemical industry. So just to give you an idea, here is an example of a direct compaction line. So the direct compaction line involves different feeders that feed the different powders and different materials. As I said at the beginning, each of the final product that comes out of the tablet press, the tablet, involves different type of materials, the API, the excipients, lubricants that are used in order to improve the flowability of the product through the processes. So we need different feeders, and we need to feed these different materials into a mixer in order to achieve the final concentration of the product. And then for this particular scenario that I'm showing you here, this then flow stream goes into a hopper, and the hopper then brings the material into the tablet press that compacts the powder into the final product, which are the tablets. So for each of these unit operations, we need to develop we need to develop a model in order to be able to be used into the flow sheet model. So for feeders, we have a set of delay differential equation. So the goal there is to be able to capture the output flow rate, feed rate dynamics, because the role of the feeder is actually to have a constant flow rate as the output of the feeder. Then the feeders are feeding into the mixer. So for the mixer now, we have developed a population balance model. The idea is to be able to predict the component concentration, total flow rate output, but also the relative standard deviation, because we are at this point we would like to be able to capture the variability of the concentration of the output stream, the mean particle size and bulk density. And then the next process operation is the hopper, which is modeled as a buffer tank in order to capture the residence time. So how much time the material spends inside the model, but we assume we don't have any mixing there. So the mass flow rate output depends on the geometry of the hopper. And then we move this material out of the hopper into the tablet press. The tablet press is modeled by a series of empirical models, including a Haeckel model and the residence time inside the feed frame that can be used to predict the main material properties out of the tablet press. And finally, we have developed a dissolution model so as to be able to capture how the tablets dissolve and what is the dissolution rate, and we have done a number of assumptions to be able to model this final step. So each of the virtual unit operation now consists of a set of equations, as I described, and for this particular case study for the direct compaction line. And now those has to be connected in order to have the flow sheet model. So as I mentioned, we have selected GPROMS as our modeling framework for the flow sheet simulation. So what you have here is that you have these equations describing the model, and you need to be able to connect the output of its unit model has to be the input for the subsequent process operation. So we need to be able to decide how we can carry the information from one unit to the next. And in GPROMS environment, we're doing that by creating ports and connections type that carry the necessary information forward. So these ports have a specific name, which is, of course, specific to this process. So if you have a powder, this is associated with special characteristics of the powder, which is like the density, the bulk density, the mass flow rate, and so on, as it's shown here. So we have developing models for these different unit operations to deal with the direct compaction as it's shown here, and we have a pilot plan at Rutgers and the other institutions of the Engineering Research Center, as I said. So the direct compaction line is shown here with the black arrows. So as I said, feeders, mixer, the tablet press directly, but for different flowing materials, you can allow to go through the dry granulation route or through the wet granulation route. And by developing these different unit models and then connecting them with the flow sheet simulation, you can evaluate different scenarios, different unit operations platforms, but also you can perform a number of different studies, and this is the sensitivity, the simulation, the design space evaluation, and the optimization studies. I'm going to show you some of those in a minute, but before I would like to dig a little bit further into the idea of incorporating particle level phenomena into the models that we're developing. The reason is that we have a number, and the pharmaceutical industry is very rich in terms of experimental data that have been developed for each different new drug development. And also there is a number of different, as I mentioned before, discrete element methods, more detailed models that involves the particle level information and design and can take into consideration different design characteristics. But the problem, as I said, is that the computational cost is very high. So what I'm going to talk to you in the next couple of slides are some ideas that we have been exploring in order, one, to take advantage of the data that we have, the experimental data. So those are the latent variable methods. And also reduced order models that take into consideration the discrete element method information that we have been developing. So this is the basic framework of the latent variable method. The idea is a simple one. It comes out of the principal component analysis methodology. And the idea is that we have, let's say, this matrix X shown here, which is a matrix of different material properties for individual materials. So you can use a number of different techniques to measure different properties for materials. Then there are also these matrix Y shown here, which is measured properties of blends. So the idea is that you are going to use a principal component analysis to first reduce dimensionality of this matrix X and come up with the scores matrix T and the loadings matrix P that is shown here, and then use this matrix T shown here, which is a weighted average score matrix. And as you see, what you're doing is you're taking into consideration now the blend ratios, the R that is shown in this equation, and of course the matrix T that you have been developing by using the material properties of the individual materials. So now you have this reduced metric T here with the weighted average scores. So you are using now this matrix as a regression, and Y is the response of the regression. And you're building the model which connects now the T, V shown here, and the Y. So this is the fitted PLS model. So every time now that you have a different blend ratio, you don't have to go and repeat any experiment, but you can use this model to capture the effects of material properties, individual material properties into the final product. So what is shown here is actually some results that has been illustrated recently in a paper written by Sal Garcia and Munoz. And the framework has been used to capture these effects of the material properties to the final products without having to perform additional experiments for the individual blends that you are trying to model. One, of course, missing element here that we would like to capture when you're talking about a flow sheet model is that we have not incorporating the operating conditions. So you're capturing the material, but you're not capturing if it changes the operating conditions inside, if each unit operation, how this will affect your material properties. So you can do this with adding one more matrix into the whole picture, though, that I showed you before. So we're talking about a multi-block PLS approach now. So as you see here, before we had only this X matrix, the R, the blend ratio, and the final product properties, Y. And now we are adding an additional matrix of the operating conditions. So now the framework becomes a little bit more complicated, but not too much. The only thing that we have to do is perform an additional PCA on these operating conditions. So as you see, this matrix here is also decomposed into the weights and loadings, and these loadings is going into the super set matrix here that is being used to do the fit between the final products and the regressor average score metrics. So by doing this, now you can capture not only the individual material properties, but also the operating conditions. And we have done that. We have tested this methodology by performing a case study. We have used a number of 22 different properties for different materials. And we have performed this analysis by testing also different operating conditions, the conditions that are shown here, feed rate variability, mill speed RPMs, and mixer speed RPMs. What is showing in the left-hand side of the slide here is the predicted properties and the measured properties. So this parity plot shows how good your prediction is. So if the prediction of those points lie in the XY line, then the prediction is very good. If it doesn't lie in the line, then the prediction is not so good. So what we've seen is that we managed to capture in most of the properties that we have tested. We managed to capture the properties. But of course, I mean, there is a need of additional, I think, what we haven't been able to capture is the fact that we didn't have too many experimental data available to make this much more predictive. Another idea that we have tried in order to be able to capture how the particle information is this latent variable reduced order method based on discrete element method. This idea has been applied a lot in the CFD simulation area, where the idea is that you discretize into finite elements, and then you solve the specific equation. You calculate some state variables like temperature and pressure. For the discrete systems, like the system that we have here, the DEM simulation, we have discrete elements, so we have particles. So now the idea is how we can discretize the geometry in order to extract average information. So I'm showing here a continuous mixer. You see here the red and the blue particles. The red and the blue particles coming in, and they mix. So what we'd like to be able to capture is what is the concentration inside the mixer and how this concentration changes as the material flows through the system. So one of the questions, of course, that we have to address is how you can discretize, because you do like to have and dense enough discretization so as to capture the spatial variability, but also coarse enough in order to be able to capture enough number of particles inside each element. So if we have very few particles, then we treat this as basically no particles at all. If we have a few particles, then we treat that as missing data. So we impute data based on the information of the adjacent elements. And if we have a large number of particles, then we use the average value. So by doing that, now we have a set of we have the discretization, so we have the set of average properties. So we perform first the design of experiment in order to capture the variability in terms of the parameters that we would like to capture in the output. We discretize, we extract the state data, and this can be velocity profiles or kinematic energy. We obtain the response data, so whatever we'd like to capture at the output, and in this case, concentration of the output is the main variable. And we perform the dimensionality data reduction using principal component analysis in order to reduce the dimensionality of the input space. And now we map at the end the reduced space to the output space. So we did this as a case study, two actually case studies, one that is able to capture the steady state velocity profiles and relative standard deviation. And then another one, we try to capture also the dynamic effects since in the continuous operation, it is also important to be able to capture the dynamic effects when you're talking about startup or shutdown of the process. The different design parameters and the range of conditions that we try and shown here, and the relative standard deviation, the way that we calculate this is shown as the difference to the mean concentration is a standard way of calculating the standard deviation of the concentration of the output. So here in this slide, I'm showing you some results for the steady state case study. You can see the average velocity profile pictorially in the top of the slide, where the DM simulation is showing in the second row, where the reduced order model is showing the first row, and even pictorially you see that basically we're able to capture the effects very well, but also the mean standard error calculated here for the different velocity profile is around 20%, and the relative standard deviation mean prediction error is around 1%, which is a good indication of what we're able to capture. Even in the dynamic case, what we've shown here is the velocity predicted by reduced order models, and this is the velocity predicted by the DEM after which is one snapshot of time, and here is the RST profile as we capture it through the time. And what is shown in this table is that we are able to capture this very efficiently with very small mean relative error. So those are the ideas, just a few ideas of the models that we're trying to develop in order to be able to incorporate it in the flow sheet simulation model that I showed you before. And the reason why we need this model is to be able to do a number of different, investigate a number of different scenarios. As I showed here, again, for the direct compaction line, there is an effect that the feeder refilling has into the, what I showed here as the API feed flow rate. So every time that there is a refill of this feeder, showing here, there is a upset in the feed flow rate. So what we can do, having a flow sheet model, is basically to investigate how this flow rate change affects the relative standard deviation of the API concentration. What is shown here is the effect that this has after the mixer. This is how this effect propagates through the mixer, but also as the red is basically how it propagates into the tablet press. And then you can start investigating ideas of how to improve this concentration profile by, let's say, putting a recirculation tank as an idea, or increasing the residence time inside the mixer. So what we show here is that this green line is basically the effects of having an increased residence time inside the mixer. And here is how this feed flow rate will be affected at the output of the mixer. So what I would like to show you now is how we be using this model to capture the, not only to run different scenarios, but also to capture the design space of individual process operations, but also how we use this in optimization. So as it shows in this slide, one of the main issues in the pharmaceutical manufacturing is to be able to capture and characterize the design space of the operation. And as you see here from the definition of the design space, is the multi-dimensional combination of the input variables and process parameters that have been demonstrated to provide assurance of quality. that if we look at what we have talked about and have been worked a lot in the literature of process systems engineering as flexibility is exactly the same definition. So it's basically the feasible operation, how your process can change, but also be able to make sure that certain constraints have been met. So what we've been doing is basically trying to use the ideas about flexibility analysis in order to characterize the design space of pharmaceutical process operations. One additional complication, though, is the fact that in most of the case, because we don't have we're using process simulation to describe the different processes, we don't have the expression, closed form expression of the constraints and that characterize the process operation. So we don't have this G constraint shown here in a closed form. So what we have been working through the years is basically development of a framework that can be used to characterize feasibility when you don't have the explicit set of constraints. So the idea is that we're starting with the initial set of sampling using some design of experiment idea, and then we're using this design, the experiment expected improvement function to sample in the regions that are close to the boundaries of the feasible region. And then we have, if the expected improvement is less than the tolerance, then we stop. Otherwise, we keep adding samples to improve our evaluation of the feasibility function. So the expected improvement function that we're using has two components. One is the standard deviation that comes from the variance of the model that we're using, and in this work we're using Kriging to describe the feasibility function. And the other, this phi function is a probability distribution function. So, and this Y prediction here is the feasibility function. So by maximizing this expected improvement function, we're maximizing the probability of incorporating additional samples at the boundary of the feasible region. So as a toy example, we have here a feasibility, a feasible space defined by a circle. So these are the initial samples. These red circles here are the refined samples, and this is the final predicted feasible region. This is an easy problem to solve. So now we have played with a non-convex feasible region, which we saw here that basically these ideas of using the expected improvement function can work well on predicting the feasible space. So we have done, we have used this idea for continuous blending feasibility space or design space. And here, basically the feasibility is defined according to the final product quality criteria. So we like to be able to minimize the relative standard deviation of the concentration of the output of the mixer. So if the predicted output is lower than the tolerance value, then it is the problem is feasible. If it's not, then it's not. It's infeasible. We actually incorporated even the effects of additional design. So here the different designs are the way that the blades are designed inside the mixer. And here is the design space in two-dimensional space. One is the flow rate inside the mixer, and the other is the RPM, how fast this blade speeds inside the mixer. and the relative standard deviation maximum value that we allow is 10%. So the different, what is shown here is if you are like to operate at high flow rates and low RPMs, then you have to use the flow forward blade configuration in order to achieve this relative standard deviation. We have done this for different process operations. Here is a slide that shows the design space of the roller compaction process. I think in terms of the, I have to skip this in order to be able to cover the optimization ideas that we have used. So the optimization, the last few slides that I'd like to share with you is the fact that in order to be able to use optimization to optimize the pharmaceutical operations that I showed you before, we deal with two problematic cases. One is that the objective function is comes out of simulation evaluations, and also the constraint comes out of the simulation evaluation. So we need to use some type of derivative-free optimization approach in order to be able to optimize such a process. So in our case, we use the simulation-based, surrogate-based optimization. And the idea is that we have a black box models, but also we have noisy functions. So by using surrogate-based optimization, we manage also to deal with the noisy functions. So there are two ways to deal with this there are two ways of dealing with this problem. One is to do a global search. So that means that we sample the entire space and then we build a global approximation. Then we're using some way of resample the space and collect additional samples. And the other idea is to use local search derivative-free optimization, which localize the search in a different points of the entire space and tries to focus on the areas that are the most promising ones. So in the last year or so, we have developed an approach that is able to capture the advantages of the global search methodology, but also uses local search methodology. So we're using the first global search initially in order to be able to capture the entire region. But also we're using, we take advantage of the fact that we sample the space to build a feasibility function using the ideas that I talked to you before. So we define the boundary of the region using the initial samples that we have. And then we concentrate it, we use the trust region approach to concentrate in all the areas that are the most promising ones. And also we're using trust region approach to be able to guarantee convergence into a local optimal solution. We're using kriging models to do the surrogate-based modeling in order to be able to capture the noise that we have in our function evaluation. So, and this is my last slide. So we have used that as a case study in our direct compaction line. We minimize the cost of 1 day of operations, and the decision variables are basically the process capacity, operating conditions, throughput, and refill strategy. So how often you refill the feeders and so on. And there are a number of constraints, including capacity-bound constraints, of course, the quality constraints for the final product, the minimum production requirement that we need to have. And we use the ideas that I described before. So this is how the model looks like. We're performing in input space, and we use the design of experiment as an initial sample space. We got a set of outputs, we built a response surface, and as I said, we're using kriging in order to be able to capture also the uncertainty of the output. And then we're using these ideas of adaptive sampling to enhance our model predictability. And the optimal cost, the optimal conditions that we obtain are the ones that are showing here. For a total flow rate, the mixer RPMs, the concentration of magnesium stearate, which is a lubricant that we're using, the refilling strategy, the hopper filling level, and the pressure in the compaction at the final stage at the tablet press. So I would like here to conclude with some of the motivating thoughts, if you wish. It is my understanding that the pharmaceutical manufacturing, pharmaceutical industry are moving to a much predictive way of performing manufacturing. So there is a need of developing models to be able to be used not only in the simulation, but also in optimization and control. I don't have the chance to talk about control, but this is an important part of using of continuous manufacturing for pharmaceutical products. The technologies that we'll be using are transferable for other industries, food and consumer goods. As we keep developing models, I think we're going to reach a stage where we can feel comfortable that the models are predictive enough that can be used not only for optimizing the operating conditions, but actually to develop better design and better flow sheets to reach the final products. So with that and acknowledgement of financial support from the Engineering Research Center, I will finish my talk, and I will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Marianthi. Excellent presentation. We have just time for 1 or 2 questions. If you'd like to put those into the chat window, or you're welcome to unmute your microphone if you'd like to, and we will just be able to field any questions for Marianthi. So, Marianthi, I just had one quick question as some of the questions are arriving. Just with the regulatory environment of pharmaceuticals, what are some of the, you've mentioned a couple exciting developments here. What issues are there with the regulatory environment in the pharmaceutical manufacturing?
Okay, so that's a great question, and actually and a very timely one, because we have last week we have a workshop at Rutgers University that the FDA, a number of people from FDA and National Science Foundation participated. The main focus of the symposium was how to move forward with continuous manufacturing in a regulatory environment. FDA, Janet Woodcock from FDA was there, and the main, her main point was that FDA would like to move forward with continuous manufacturing, and would like to make certain that all the people at the FDA are on board with the developments that have been done. And so we have been working with FDA. We have actually a project with them And we had a training session last week that people from FDA came, and we've trained how to use GPROMs and how to use the models in order to be able to do a number of the things that I presented today, but also how to use, like, how to develop better models, but also how you use the models in order to do sensitivity analysis, how to do variability propagation, and so on. So I think FDA is on board on all of these technologies, especially the continuous manufacturing. So I'm pretty certain that this will move forward.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like some exciting developments. So we have time for just one more question. Don't forget to unmute your microphone if you'd like to ask a question. Or again, you can put it into the chat window as well. Okay, so we had just one more question that's come in. So you talked about pushing to constraints, and so one question is, with the feasible region, you may be tempted to push to lower concentration limits of expensive ingredients. How do you deal with that in this framework?
So the feasible space, of course, I mean, it's you need to have some constraints in terms of what you would like to achieve. And the idea is with the feasibility that actually are trying to capture the whole feasible space, right? So for a mixer, for example, you would like to make sure that you know all the different operating conditions which meet certain requirements. If you're moving towards the optimization, then this question is much more relevant, because then you might be moving towards low concentration of the API. But again, I mean, it's how you handle the different variables in the optimization. If you think that this is not something that you would like to entertain, then I guess, I mean, those will not be in the set of the design or operating variables that you would like to manipulate. So I think, the framework is flexible enough to accommodate a variety of different constraints, and depending on the specific case study, the different constraints can change.
Okay, great. I just have one more question that's come in. The question is, hi, broad question, but how far away do you see the industry from having the first industrial implementation of CP/M?
So I heard last week that Vertex, which is, of course, a pharmaceutical company, has been approved for the continuous manufacturing of the first drug.
Oh, fantastic! So that's another exciting development. Vertex Pharmaceutical there in Boston.
Yep.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, Marianthi, thank you so much for the presentation. And we have our next presentation that's going to be on June 9th by Jeff Renfro at Honeywell Process Solutions. So we're excited. Jeff was able to join us as well today. But Marianthi, excellent presentation. I thought it was an excellent overview of some of these advanced techniques, and certainly impressive the way you're applying some of these modeling tools, but also optimization to solve some very challenging problems. So thank you again, Marianthi.
Thank you very much, John, and let me know if there are additional questions. I will be happy to respond.
Okay, fantastic. And so with that, yes, if you have any additional questions, feel free to email me or to Marianthi directly, and you email them to me, I'll go and direct them to her. Okay, thanks everybody for joining, and we'll talk to you guys, I think, in about a few weeks for our next webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you, John.